Hi friends, in today's Photoshop 101 video we're going to go over frequency separation and how I use that technique to retouch images in Photoshop. Hey folks, my name is David Bird with Reimagined and welcome to the channel. I'm an award-winning photographer, Photoshop artist, and educator that focuses on fantasy and cosplay art. It's a thrill to share my knowledge and imagination with you and to help you create your own artwork. In this Photoshop 101 video series, we're going to explore the basic tools, functions, and techniques that I use inside of Photoshop to create the art of Reality Reimagined. This video series is sponsored by McKenna Pro, an industry-leading professional print lab for photographers and designers. They have a vast array of mediums to share your images, whether it be traditional paper prints, metal, canvas, and even weathered pieces of wood. Their albums are some of the best in the industry, and their customer service is compared to none. Whether you're a professional, hobbyist, or just have images that you want to preserve and display, McKenna will help you. Visit their site at mckennapro.com to see their products, pricing, and to learn more. And to begin our journey today, we're going to go into Photoshop. In a previous video, I showed you how to create an action for frequency separation in 16-bit mode, and this is the product of our hard work, and this action is right here called FS 16-bit. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this window, and now we're going to go through the process of what I actually do with frequency separation to retouch. So the first thing that I always want to do, and I kind of stair-step it, so it's a good way to kind of organize in your mind what you want to do, instead of jumping all over the place. So, oh, I want to clean up the color. Oh, I should fix that back. Oh, I need to get rid of that blemish. Oh, the hair. No. Just start with one area and move through the image. So in this case, I prefer to start with the details layer, because the details layer kind of belies to me, it denotes to me that I need to go through and start actually retouching the skin and retouching areas of the picture, the background, and anything that needs to be removed or enhanced or adjusted. So to do that, I'm going to use my Wacom Intuos Pro tablet and this lovely little pen that I love. If you don't use a pen tablet, if you don't use Wacom or any other brand, that's okay. But not using a pen tablet as an artist in Photoshop is like a neural surgeon doing neural surgery on your brain by using their feet instead of their hands. So consider getting a pen tablet. It will change your life. I'm going to hit S for the clone stamp tool, and that's my preferred tool that I like to use when I work on the details layer in frequency separation. I'm going to hit Z for the zoom tool so we can move in. Now, Emma's a friend of mine. She's a fantastic model and actress, and I made sure that she understood that she's going to be out there on the interwebs for the rest of time, zoomed in close-ups on her face so we can see some of the challenges in her skin. She has beautiful skin and she takes care of herself very well, so there's not a lot of things that we have to go over today to fix. But again, hitting S for the clone stamp tool and demonstrating the clone stamp tool, again, on the details layer, this is all texture. So yes, you're going to see color and so forth visually, but it's not going to adjust color. We're just going to borrow texture. Now keep in mind the texture itself has some properties of color, and more importantly, it has properties of luminescence. So if you start grabbing textures from other areas and moving them to somewhere else, you may notice that in the process. When I retouch and use the clone stamp healing tool or the healing brush tool, specifically for getting rid of blemishes, I try to stay in the same zone on the face wherever I'm working. Again, we're going to get rid of this little blemish here that's in between her eyebrows. I don't want to grab skin texture from down here in her cheek. And the reason why is this. This skin texture and this zone has a certain quality of light to it and focus. This area down here is darker and it may be out of focus. So I could be taking blurry pixels, blurry details, and bringing them up into an area where it's not blurry. Darker details and putting them into a lighter area of details. That causes a blemish all in itself. So that's why it's important just to stay in the same range wherever you're working, in the same zone on the image. Using the clone stamp tool, what I need to do is to tell the tool to select an area as a target, and then it's going to grab that detail from that target area and move it to wherever I paint. So in this case, I'm going to hold down the Alt key. On a Mac, it's the Alt key? Is there an Alt key on a Mac? There's a Shift key. Is there an Alt? I don't know. So hit Alt, And then I'm going to find an area in the same zone that has some good texture to use to kind of replicate. If we look here at the skin of her texture between her eyes, we notice that there is a little bit of pores and activity that we can see. So I'm going to come up to this area here and hit Alt and then tap once. And when I do that, I've told the clone stamp tool, grab this area of texture. And now wherever I start painting, it's going to reference that area and move it over. So now on the details layer, I'm just going to gently paint with my Wacom tablet and start painting in some details. Now, you'll notice that you see in the color just a little bit of a distortion. So it looks like the pimple is still there because that's a color effect, which is on the color layer, color 2 and color 1. We're going to adjust those too, but right now we're fixing the details. If we would have started with the color layer and just adjusted the color, you would still see the texture of the pimple, and we need to get rid of that, or the blemish, I should say. Pimple. I never liked the word pimple. It's too many P's. Pimple. It's just nasty. And not because I got made fun of in high school because I had pimples. Don't bring that up. So anyway, on the details layer, we've moved the details and textures around to get rid of some of those blemishes. When I started painting, if you'll notice, you can see the plus sign right now. As I paint and come up, I want to get rid of these blemishes here. It's going to move that arrow up. It's moving the selection because what I checked right here is called aligned. So when I made that first section or first selection of texture, when aligned is checked, that crosshairs is going to move equidistant with the brush itself. If I uncheck this, come on. Gotta use my mouse. The pen's being wonky today. When I uncheck this and I select an area to sample and target right here, and then I paint, and now I want to go get this blemish up here. When I paint, notice the crosshair stays in the same spot. That's what I prefer to do with the clone stamp tool because I find a good area of texture in the skin and then I clone that in the same zone. So I don't have it aligned so it moves around with me, because if I did and as I started moving up, the crosshairs would hit her hair and it would clone the texture over. It's just a mess. So uncheck aligned, it'll save your life. So that's still a good texture. So we're going to get rid of some of these blemishes now in a little bit of a faster way. And you'll notice again, the color is not moving because we're just adjusting texture. They're independent of each other, which is the power of frequency separation. But if you don't take the time to work with them independently, it'll look all weird. Okay, cool. We've gotten rid of some of those blemishes. That looks pretty good. I'm going to look at the rest of her skin, the rest of the images. For the purposes of the YouTube video, I don't want this to be, abhorrently long. So I'm not going to go through a full retouch in this manner right now. I just want to demonstrate the process and the power and what you need to use these different tools and the different steps of frequency separation to accomplish in your image. So right here, there's a little bit of makeup particles that are on her cheek. So I'm going to grab an area of her cheek in the same zone. Hit Alt and select, and now I'm just going to paint to get rid of some of that texture. And in some cases, depending upon what you're trying to remove, it may completely remove it when you do the details layer itself. But most of the time, you're going to have to go to the color layer as well and just kind of adjust some of that color. So now I'm just looking at different areas of her skin and areas where I need to kind of retouch and pull those out. And you know what? This is a good time to take a little bit of a timeout and talk about some principles and values of retouching. I don't want to get too in-depth, too political on this, but I do want to express my opinion. I run a brick and mortar portrait studio for a long time. We did weddings and families and high school seniors and babies and all kinds of stuff. I've had a lot of people, usually women, that come and say, oh my gosh, you can Photoshop me right. You can Photoshop all this because this is Photoshop. And the ones that really broke my heart were teenagers. Teenagers were so self-conscious of their looks. And, just Photoshop everything because I'm just idiots, right? And I would tell every client the same thing every single time. I will Photoshop you to the level of your comfort, but I would not be doing you a professional service if I did not warn you about one thing. You will see the picture and you will be satisfied. Everybody else that knows you will see that photo and knows that it has been altered. It has been changed. That photo is no longer who you really are. So think about your level of comfort of Photoshop. Let me know and I'll do the work for you. That's what I would tell people all the time, especially teenagers or brides. Men all the time, they want this fixed. Me too. And I tell them, cool, I'll Photoshop in a whole messy weave. But when people see that picture, they're going to go, somebody's compensating for something, right? So when I retouch an image in any of my videos on YouTube or when I'm teaching at a conference or working with a client, I always try to do some of the basic things that are expected regardless of making any kind of statement about beauty. So usually women don't want to see the line in their cheek that's caused by makeup or by age. They don't want to see the pimples. They don't want to see all the nasty stuff, right? So I try to retouch that. You may see me in future videos use the liquefy tool to push in somebody's stomach, to expand somebody's chest, somebody's bicep, cloning in hair. I do it because I make sure that aesthetically I'm meeting the client's needs and expectations. And I'm not going too far as to the point where they no longer look real and believable. And that's kind of my personal brand of where I stick to it. And again, I always communicate with the client. I communicate with Emma to make sure that she knew that she'd be on the YouTubes forever, getting some of these blemishes removed and so forth. So going back to our frequency separation, we're just taking some details again and just trying to clone out some of these little distractions. From a visual design perspective, I'm also trying to remove things that are distractions that your eyes may go to and focus on. If this was an image that I would put into like image competition or to a magazine, then again, I would want to go through and make sure that I removed anything that's a distraction so that it doesn't show up and cause the viewer to start jumping all over the place. So we went through and cleaned up some of the textures, again, like right down here, we can get rid of some of these textures of blemishes and so forth. And now, before we move on to the color layer, that's the typical process I would do with the details layer to remove blemishes and retouch. But what I want to show you is the mixer brush tool, because we're about to use it here in just a second on the color layer itself. But the mixer brush tool has a wonderful benefit of also helping you out with skin texture. So I'm going to hit B for brush, which activates this window here inside of Photoshop. And then when you hover over and stay there, Photoshop has these lovely little handy... What is that? Is that a fish? Is like a fish from hell? Because that's seriously screwed up, Adobe. Like, I'm going to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and be like, I'm out of water there, mommy, help me. So when you mouse over a tool, it's going to give you that little flyout window. When you right click on the tool itself, it gives you a little flyout window of other tools that are accessed in that area on your tools palette. So come down to mixer brush. The mixer brush is like a painter's mixer brush. It's a big fan brush that you would mix paints together. It's how they would blend color and introduce new color into a painting. Same kind of concept. So the key areas here, it's set to custom. Right now, this icon here, when you hover over it, it will show you what it actually does. This one is clean the brush after each stroke. That's key. Make sure that it's checked. Because what happens is when we touch this brush to the image, it's going to sample the color that's there as if it was dipping it into paint, right? If we started using the mixer brush to retouch and we didn't dump that color, it's going to introduce that color into other areas. We don't want to do that. What we simply want to do is use it to mix the colors that are right there, that we're interacting with the image. In older versions of Photoshop, there used to be, it's a smudge tool, it's still there, and it's kind of the same thing. In other painting programs, you use the mixer brush to blend colors together, and that's what we're going to do. But before we use it to blend colors in the color layers, we're going to use it to soften texture on the details layer. This is how you can get past some issues where people have really deep pores in their skin or some rough textures. You can kind of use this step to very finely remove that detail, so to speak. So the settings for the mixer brush are going to be the same whether we work in the details layer or the color layer. Wet, giggity. Wet set at 100%, load set at 100%, mix set at 100%, and flow is the only thing that you're going to change. Flow and opacity with brushes, I will have a video where I'll kind of demonstrate that and explain that as a basic technique and tool, a little tip inside of Photoshop. But opacity is essentially dipping, it's the best way I've ever heard it explained. If you take a paintbrush and dip it into some paint and you pull it all the way out, that's 100% paint on that brush, that's your opacity. If you take that 100% paint and you put it on your canvas and just gently touch the canvas with that 100% paint, that's a flow of 10%. If I take that paintbrush with 100% paint and mash it down the canvas and smear it back and forth, that's a flow of 100%. I'm putting all that paint down. I never change opacity in any brush that I use. I leave opacity at 100%. I always change the flow because flow at a lower percentage, like 10 or 5 or 2, lets me build up whatever I'm using that tool with over time. And that's a great way to have control. So in this case, again, wet, giggity, 100%, load 100%, mix 100%, flow 10%. And make sure this is checked to dump the paint after each brush stroke. Now, we aren't going to mix any colors here because we're on the details layer, but let's go to an area where there's 2 too strong of detail. This is where, again, the fine pores and texture in the skin can be adjusted. So I'm hitting B for brush to make sure that I'm on the mixer brush. And again, we're set to a flow of 10%. I'm on the details layer. I'm just going to gently touch my pen to my Wacom Intuos Pro tablet. I'm not sponsored or paid by them yet, and I hope that I am, because I've used Wacom for years, but I just want to mention the tool because I use it, and it flabbergasts me that people in this day and age don't use tablets. I know there's a learning curve to learn how to use the pen, but it is truly, it will expand your artwork tremendously. So I'm just going through the image and I'm just gently touching the tablet, and I'm just moving the brush back and forth, and all this is doing is just gently softening those details. Now, again, this is a step in the process of retouching. I know that if this was an image that I was working on for the client, for a commercial client going to a magazine, that eventually I'm going to add and introduce details back into the image at another point. So right now I'm trying to soften a lot of that texture that we see that we may not want to be there. We'll just try to soften it down just a smidge and make sure that none of it pops out too much. This is also a great way, again, this is a statement that could get us dangerously close to making a value judgment, so be careful what you think here. This is a great way to also, for women who have hair on their face where they don't want it, this is a great way to blend in those soft little hairs so we don't see them as much in the image. And those details really pop up, so we can now smooth them out just a smidge. And this is just a gentle little touch to those details, again, throughout the image and in those areas. And now, I'm going to hit this area right here where these pores are just a little strong by her hairline. And now, with the mixer brush still activated, we're going to come down to the color number 2 layer. As I've said in the previous video where I showed how to create the action inside of Photoshop, all of the mixer brush work that I'm going to do, I do on color number 2. Color number 1 is the exact same layer. But as I work in this process, zoomed in all the way like this, when I zoom back out in 5 minutes and go, oh my gosh, what did I do? I made that horrible like hellfish under that icon, right? Then I have the original color layer to reference back to mask back into the picture if I need, to save me from myself and what I've done with the mixer brush tool. So now, I'm going to hit Control and minus to zoom back out just a little bit. My microphone's always in the way of my keyboard. I want to blend color with the mixer brush. This gives it an artistic little painterly kind of touch and effect, but it's a great way to kind of smooth out transitions of color in the image. And it's also a great way to get rid of some of those blemishes. So using the mixer brush, what I want to do is to follow the contour of the face, or the subject, the icon, the image, whatever you're working on, right? You want to follow that contour and push color in it back and forth. It's not replacing it, it's just mixing the colors together. So let's look at this blemish right now. And let's think about this. I'm going to zoom in one more time. Right here in the brow, in between on her brow, the skin tone is a little bit darker. So think about it in the future. If I push all this darkness up, what am I doing? I'm increasing that shadow there, which can make it look like she has a furrowed brow, or it may not be pleasing. So what I want to do is take some of the brightness in this color up here and push it down into that area. I'm getting rid of the issues of color from the blemish, and I'm also, in a way, dodging and burning the image just a little bit. I'm enhancing the overall brightness to bring us away from that very strong brow shadow, right? So I'm going to zoom back out now that I've demonstrated that. I'm hitting B for brush to make sure that I'm on it, and I'm starting at the top. I'm making contact with my tablet, keeping continuous contact with the tablet, and pushing down and then letting go. So I'm going to contact and push down and let go. And it's a subtle little thing. Hopefully you can see it in the video here on YouTube. It's a subtle little thing that it did because we're on a flow of 10%. If I change that flow to 100%, you better believe you're going to see the color move. But it's too much and it's too heavy-handed, and there's banding and all kinds of issues that occur. That's why the flow at 10% is key for this kind of process. So I'm going to come back up again and touch and bring these lighter colors down and just smooth out that brightness. I'm also replacing the color contamination from the blemish. I push the lighter colors up now because, again, there's a little bit of a tonal color luminance difference right through here, and I'm just trying to smooth all that out. Again, I'm retouching the image, and what I'm doing is I'm making contact, gesturing down and lifting, and then coming back up, making contact, gesturing and lifting. It's dumping the color every time, introducing a new color and just pushing it in. And I'm just gently pushing in these colors. Now, three-dimensionally, if I start pushing some of the lighter color here on her brow into this area in her skull around her eye, I'm going to get rid of some of that shadow, but it's also going to have, in my opinion, undesired effect. It's going to flatten out her face, and that just looks not pleasing. So I don't necessarily want to do that. If the shadow area is too strong, of course you can use a mixer brush on this color layer to do it, Or you can use the traditional brush and actually paint some color in using the paint on this one, this blank layer right here. But right now, again, I'm just going to introduce color by just pushing it down. I'm following the contour. I'm following the contour right here. This is the contour of her cheek coming up into her eye. I don't want to go side to side. That's not the contour. The colors need to flow. A makeup artist would tell you the same thing. You need to contour the face. You need to pull makeup through the areas and up and lift and so forth. Same thing we're doing right now. Pushing some of this lightness down and just trying to gently blend these colors together. Again, I'm making contact, lifting, and adjusting. I'm pushing up now and pushing back down just to blend some of those areas. The strong specular highlight on her nose from the lights, this is a great way to kind of remove that, to adjust that. So again, from a distraction standpoint, we don't have a lot of distractions visually where your eyes start jumping all over the place, right? Same thing down here. We can follow the contours of the chin and push colors around. Push them around. I feel aggressive, like the colors on a playground, in Photoshop playground. I'm like, push you around. Push this color wherever I want. It's last time you get on the Jungle Gem. Skin tone color number 35721. So I'm going to push a little bit more of these shadows, and I'm going to bring them down just a little bit more. Okay, and I'm pushing some of the lightness into the bottom of her cheekbone so that it lifts up the contouring, the darker area of her cheekbone, which will therefore make her cheekbone peek out. Pushing some of the lightness down into here. Again, smoothing this transition out just a little bit. And this is why I said just a moment ago, as you're working, you can get caught up in the process of following the contours, moving the colors around. And you may not be thinking of the overall product until you hit Control and 0 and zoom back out. And she, I think, looks okay. If you disagree, then good for you. But if you went too far, that's why you have color number 1. So you can go back to that safety net and say, oh crap, I made this mistake. I need to now pull it back because I went too far. So in this case, I don't think we went too far. We're on color number 2. I'm going to zoom back in one more time, hit B for brush, and push some color up into these areas, and it looks pretty good. So that's how I use the mixer brush, both on the details layer to soften out some of the textures, and then on the color layer itself to start blending all the colors together. It makes a smoother transition between highlight and shadow, smoother transitions through contouring. It's a much more pleasing aesthetic effect. Now I want to demonstrate the last step in this process, which is to paint on this one, this blank layer. Hit B for brush and come back into your window, right click on the tool window to bring up the little window of all the other tools nestled under there, and then click B for the regular brush tool. And then again, opacity is set to 100%, flow is set to 10%. My brush is huge, that's why let's just bring it down. And I do want to fill in this shadow that we see right through here. Just a smidge. I don't want to do too much, but I just want to fill it in just a little bit to make it gentle. Hitting B for brush, and I'm going to hold Alt, which will default to the eyedropper tool to let me select some color. So click, and now my foreground color is set to the skin tone, as you can see here in this little box. And then over in this darker area, I'm decreasing the size of my brush by hitting the left bracket key. I can make it smaller. If I hit the right bracket key, it makes the brush bigger. I'm painting on this one, paint on this one layer that's blank. And again, a flow of 10%, and I'm just making some gentle brush strokes just to fill in just gently some of these shadows. And it's not replacing the details. It's not covering them up. If I would not have done the frequency separation process and separate the details onto their own layer and paint, you would just start seeing the color and no texture. And then it looks obviously interesting. So I'm going to look around for some other areas that I can do the same thing. And my goal with this is to contour the face a little bit, fix some of the modeling of the skin and the tones and the colors and so forth, and just try to genuinely make a pleasing aesthetic look. It's the same thing we do with the mixer brush, but we're using the real one now and just painting on some areas to just kind of gently smooth everything together in a unifying way. This is also, by the way, the same process that I would do. I'm just making this little area a little bit stronger. It's the same process that I would do that we're doing right now to fix the bags in the eyes. This is a darker tone right here underneath her eyelid. I don't actually want to adjust that, and I would stress as a tip and technique when you're retouching, don't remove that fine little darkness right underneath the eyelid because it delineates three-dimensionality to the picture. If you get rid of this darkness, it looks like there's no, to make a curve, to make something look orbed and shaped and round, you need highlight and shadow to pull that off, right? So in this case, if you remove that shadow, it's just going to make it look like she has no bottom eyelid and it just looks funky. So, but again, just for purposes of demonstration, if the bags were horrible, this is where I would fix it and just gently start painting on those colors. And the beautiful process here with frequency separation is, as you'll notice, the texture is still there. We're not using the healing brush to get rid of all of it. It's going to mash it all together and look like crap. We're just painting in some color to get rid of the bag that you may see in that area. And again, in the same area right now on her skin, there's just a little tonal difference in this little band right here in her skin. I'm trying to blend all that together. I'm finding a nice color, both in color and luminance, and just gently feathering it in to these areas. And just now I'm going to grab this darker color here of the makeup that she has on her cheek, and now I'm just feathering it back up. I'm gently blending all these colors together into this nice, soft little look. Okay, I think really that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to hit Control and 0 to zoom all the way back out into our document. One final step and use of frequency separation that I love to do is I love to use it to fix backgrounds. This is a piece of 50% seamless gray paper at the studio that I'm a co-op member of, and the paper it's seen better days. So what I want to do is come down to the color layer number 2, hit B for brush. I'm going to come over to the icon window, brush tool palette window. That hellfish is just, why would they do that? Nobody needs to, Adobe, no. Right-click the tab, the tool, and then come down to Mixer Brush tool again. And then I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger. And then in here, you see these rough crinkles in the paper. On color number 2, I'm just going to start doing the same thing we did before. I'm painting up and down. This time I'm maintaining contact the whole time because I'm really just wanting to gently move those colors around just to get rid of those wrinkles in the paper. And now I'm going to start doing the gestures where I'm just pushing the color down. I've got to be careful because it can push it into her clothing if you're not careful. So you got to be careful. Be careful. Careful is always key, especially when there's hellfish lurking about in your tools. And then same thing over here. I'm just pushing those colors up and down, making those fine little gestures, lifting so it dumps the paint. I'm pushing up the contour because again, there's light on this, so those colors are different. And I'm just pushing everything around and smoothing it out just a little bit. Okay, so to give you a before and after, I'm going to Control plus just to zoom in. Look at this background. This is where we were. Color number 1 is now revealed because I turned off color number 2. This is where we were with all that texture. This is where we are. Now focus on her face. I'll give you a moment to kind of take it all in. This is where we are. This is after all the frequency separation, or painting and blending with the mixer brush. This is where we were before. Just a little bit of the contouring changes. Smoothing out those transitions between highlight and shadow. That's the key, and that's the power of this tool. Really, the power of the tool is that the details are separated on a different layer. Before, after, and before. That's my process when I use frequency separation. I go to the details layer first to start the workflow. I use the clone stamp tool to remove any textures of blemishes. Then I come down to the color number 2 layer. I switch to my mixer brush. I make sure that my mixer brush has a flow set to 10% and also has the box checked to clean all the color off the brush when you use it. I go through color number 2, blending those highlights and shadows together, pulling all the image together in a smooth transition in all the different areas, following the contour of the face or the subject of your image. Then I can use it to clean up the background and so forth using the mixer brush. And then the final step is to go to paint on this one, this blank layer, and add some actual paint using the traditional brush and painting it into areas to further refine that entire process. This concludes our journey today with this video of going over frequency separation. In an upcoming video, I'm going to show you how to make an action for dodging and burning, which is another popular step in retouching. And then we'll have a video after that that goes over the actual process of dodging and burning and how I use it to work on these images. Thank you for watching this video. If you like the content here, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel. This is a new YouTube channel, and this is the beginning of my new YouTube young adult life. I've been teaching myself Photoshop for a number of years. Back before YouTube ever existed, I was reading magazines and going to conferences. When YouTube became a thing, I devoured as many tutorials as possible. I have an overactive imagination. I create artwork all the time. There's going to be future content on this channel showing how to make cosplay and fantasy art composites, sharing my experiences at comic book conventions and photography conventions where I teach, and special projects that I work on throughout the year. So consider subscribing to follow all that content, and also please consider going to McKennonPro.com and checking out their services as a print lab. They are a fantastic company. They have supported me for years in my career, and I'm so very thankful grateful for it and what they do. All the products that I deliver to my clients, it's either on metallic paper or metal prints. The color that is reproduced on those two mediums is just jaw-droppingly amazing, and the clients love it every single time. So visit mechanopro.com, see how they can help you out. Thank you for watching the video, and until next time, I'll see you in the world, out there in the world of Photoshop. I screwed up my own tagline ending. See you out there in the world of Photoshop. See you next time.